It's the Real News Network. I'm Sharmini Pires coming to you from Baltimore, and welcome to the Dimitri Lascaris report. Dimitri is a class action securities lawyer called to practice in the state of New York and the province of Ontario, and he's on the board of the Real News Network, and he's also our Greek correspondent. Thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be back, Sharmini.
So, Dimitri, I understand there's some new economic data out on Greece and things aren't looking good. What's happening?
Well, after the current government, the Syriza-led government, adopted or agreed to implement an even harsher austerity program than the Greek people had rejected in a referendum last July, he began to say that 2016 was going to be the year at which the Greek people see a light at the end of the tunnel. And by the way, this is language that was used by every prior administration that had participated in the implementation of an austerity program in Greece, which has been going on for about 6 years now. And of course, the light at the end of the tunnel has never actually shone on the Greek people. So the early indications, not at all surprisingly, given the harshness of this particular austerity program, even worse than the prior ones, are bad. And specifically what has happened is that the unemployment rate for the first quarter of 2016 has been revealed. It has risen from a nosebleed 24.4% to 24.9%. So it was a half percentage point increase, and it's almost a 25%. This is, of course, a depression era level of employment, which has persisted for years in Greece. And a very troubling statistic about the unemployment picture is that slightly in excess of 70% of the unemployed population are long-term unemployed, which means that they've been unemployed for more than 12 months. And as anybody who has been unemployed knows, the longer you're out of the job market, the harder it is to get back into it, at least in terms of finding stable employment that can sustain you. And it's against this backdrop, remarkably, that the governor of the Bank of Greece, Yannis Stounaris, recently came to Parliament and made some comments about the austerity program. Now, Stounaris is the former finance minister under the conservative government of Antonis Samaras, who was defeated by Alexis Tsipras, the Syriza leader, in the election in January of last year. He was appointed to be the governor of the Central Bank of Greece by Samaras, and to the disappointment of the left, he has remained in that post under the Syriza government. So he presented an economic picture to Parliament in the last few days, and in it he urged that dramatic debt relief. Well, I'm qualifying it as dramatic, but I think that's a charitable characterization of what he said. He said that there should be debt relief for Greece, but that it should not result in losses to the creditors of Greece. And this is a pure fantasy. It's a fantasy that you could have debt relief for Greece that is going to have any prospect of rendering the debt sustainable, which does not entail losses for the creditors. Even more remarkably, perhaps, he suggested that the primary budget surplus being demanded by the ECB and the EC of 3.5%, which is a pipe dream and has been recognized by the IMF as being a pipe dream, should be relaxed. However, he's suggesting that it be relaxed to 2%. Why is that remarkable? It's remarkable because the IMF itself, one of the creditors, has urged that the primary budget surplus be relaxed to less than that, 1.5%, and has characterized even that target as being quite optimistic. Those were the words of the IMF. Why is the governor of the Central Bank of Greece, suggesting a form of debt relief which is going to be ineffective and which is less dramatic than what has been urged by the IMF? The IMF, at least initially, was saying that there had to be a write-down of the debt, a substantial reduction in the face amount of the debt, which clearly
and has the IMF backed down on that?
The IMF backed down on the write-down, but it didn't back down. It then switched when it was clear that the German government in particular and other European governments were not going to tolerate any kind of a write-down at all. It started talking about other forms of debt relief, which were substantial, but probably at the end of the day were going to be inadequate, including capping the interest rate, giving Greece a multi-decade debt holiday, extending the maturities and so forth. It would have been substantial debt relief, as I say, probably inadequate because it didn't involve a write-down of the debt. But here you have the governor of the Central Bank of Greece saying something which is just fantasy land, that you can render Greece's debt sustainable without occasioning losses to the creditors. And why is Why is the governor of the Central Bank of Greece doing that? I think ultimately because he is an adherent, as is indicated by the fact that he was the finance minister under conservative government, of the EU's neoliberal policies. And his devotion is not primarily, it seems to me, to the interest of the Greek people, but rather to the ideology of the EU elite, and that's reflected in what he's recommending in Parliament.
And what is the human dimension of all of this, with these levels of unemployment?
One catastrophic aspect of this is a brain drain. I mean, when you're looking at a 25% unemployment rate for the general population, over 70% of which is long-term, and I didn't mention this, but a youth unemployment rate in excess of 55%, more than 1 out of every 2 youths in Greece has no job. What is going to happen? Those with any job prospects whatsoever outside of the disastrous economic circumstances of Greece are going to leave the country. And they've left en masse, and they're going to continue to leave en masse. And what you're going to have left increasingly is an aging population in a country that is extremely financially stressed, that is suffering a humanitarian crisis, and that on top of all of that is dealing with a massive influx of refugees who are being effectively trapped in the country by border closures to the north. That paints a very dire picture for the future of Greece. And as I say, I've said this previously, and I hate to sound pessimistic, but it's very difficult to see how the economy and the society of Greece will ever recover under these circumstances.
Yeah, and not to mention the rest of Europe. I mean, where will they be going if there's a brain drain? Because the rest of Europe, when you look at Spain, now France, with all of its labor unrest and youth unemployment, we've been covering that, and also with the Brexit coming up, there's those kinds of developments in the UK as well. Where would they be going?
It's an interesting question. I mean, to the extent that they're highly educated, they're probably going to be able to find, I mean, I wouldn't say probably, but they're going to have decent prospects of finding employment in the more stable economies of Europe. Where it becomes really problematic is you're not highly educated, you don't happen to have educational qualifications which are in demand in one of those economies. You mentioned Brexit, by the way, Sharmini. Interestingly, a poll came out today which showed that the Leave camp has surged to a 6-point lead 1 week in advance of the Brexit poll. And, I think there certainly has to be some relationship between what is happening in Greece and what has happened in the other countries of Europe, not just in terms of the economic hardships that the austerity policies of the EU have occasioned, but also in terms of the complete indifference of the EU elite to the democratic will of the peoples of the South. And I think that that's sending a very loud message to the people of England and Britain. And that message is that the EU doesn't really care about your political choices and is going to continue to adhere to an economic philosophy and ideology which has been proven to be disastrous in the face of a mountain of evidence that it's disastrous. It's persisting in these policies. One would think that there would be some relaxation of these economic policies, and there would be some greater regard given to the democratic choices of the European people when the European elite is confronted by the potential departure of a major partner within the European Union. But there's no sign whatsoever that there's going to be a relaxation of those policies, or that greater regard is going to be given to the democratic choices of Europeans.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to make sense why the ruling parties of these countries like France and Greece, why they're adhering to these policies when it just means it's leading to the demise of the European Union altogether.
Yes, and leading to great social instability in France. You may recall that Yanis Varoufakis, the former finance minister of Greece, has said repeatedly that he was told by higher-ups in the EU elite during the negotiations over the bailout last year, that the EU felt it couldn't allow any relaxation of the policies in Greece because it needed to send a message to France, and that relaxation of those policies would not be tolerated. And sure enough, here we are, several months later, and there's massive unrest in France. Daily riots, tear gassing of the population. There are constraints on the fuel supply because of strikes that are being held across the country, and it seems very much that what Yanis Varoufakis predicted is coming to pass, which is Greece was a precursor to what was intended to be done to the economy of France.
All right, Dimitri, I thank you so much for your report today. A lot to think about, and looking forward to having you back next week.
Thank you, Sharmini.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.